Chapter 391. 15 minutes later, a section of the carriage set off from the station under the pull of an invisible gravitational force, accompanied by a whistle that came from nowhere. That's it. Huaisher looked around at the scenery in the carriage in astonishment. Where's the promised luxury? Where's the promised honorable experience? Where's the King good memory? He rubbed his teeth and suddenly wanted to pull out a knife to sharpen it. He wanted to cut someone. If it weren't for the fact that there were no trained personnel in this carriage at all, it was completely different from the expected luxury train, honorable experience, and meticulous and considerate service. Not only was there only a section of the carriage, but there wasn't even the front of the carriage. The interior of the carriage. It was like changing a freight train, right? There was no air conditioning, no cushions, and even the windows were broken. Fortunately, the chairs could be sat on, and there was no difference anyway. They were all small stools that cost 5 yuan in the market and were casually welded to the floor. And they weren't even welded properly. Even if they bought a standing ticket, this was too much. How was this worth 500,000 yuan? Someone had just said that people in the modern realm were all swindlers, but in the end, they encountered such rampant and malicious fraud at the border. They even dared to cheat the money of the Astronomy Society. It wasn't easy for him to get some stolen goods. This kind of goods couldn't even be considered average, yet they dared to limit the exemption. Huaisher was furious. She even had the urge to blow up the car. After a long time, he suppressed his anger and let out a long sigh. There was no other way. Plans couldn't keep up with changes. At worst, he could just get off at the next station. The key was to suck up to them first. He slowly looked at the gray-clothed man sitting on the folding stool next to him. The prematurely aged, middle-aged worker hugged his briefcase and leaned against the rusty carriage. The carriage swayed with the sound of the hammering of the rails. He looked extremely pitiful. This was too much. How could this group of people treat their big brother like this? Huaisher sat directly opposite him. With a bang, he seemed to be startled. Just as he was at a loss, he saw the serious face of the young man in front of him suddenly squeeze out a flattering smile and reach his hand into his pocket. Tequagua, pow, pow, pow. A bottle of happy water, still cold, was taken out from the crack in his chest. Oh, thanks. The gray-clothed man was stunned for a long time, and then he was flattered. Before he could open the can, he saw Huaisher take out the lunchbox that Feng Shu had made for him before he left from his saddlebag. He opened it neatly, and a rich aroma spread out. He stuffed it into the hands of the gray-robed man. Daogua, CI chicken drumstick. Okay. Then Huaisher rummaged in his pocket and took out a cigarette from the metal box. He opened it respectfully and offered it with both hands. Tequagua, smoke this. Hold on. A minute later, the gray-clothed man, who was holding a bottle of Coke in his left hand and a box in his right and had 2 cigarettes stuffed in his mouth, was dumbfounded to see Huaisher take out another bag of salted peanuts that Feng Shu had lovingly made. Big brother, monked si hua. When the man in gray struggled to take the peanuts, Huaisher magically took out a violin that she had made in her free time from her pocket. She smiled warmly and said, "Don't worry, I don't know what you're doing. Big brother, eat slowly, I'll accompany you. That's enough." The gray-clothed man's expression twitched, and he helplessly grabbed Huaisher's hand. "Big brother, there's no need, there's really no need. Big brother, just call me Xiao. Why, don't be so distant." Huaisher raised his hand and seriously stopped his big brother's behavior. As the saying goes, rely on your parents at home and rely on your brothers when you go out. You and I feel like old friends at first sight. I'm just trying to be humble. Please don't refuse. What a joke. Huaisher was still preparing to massage Big Brother's back and shoulders later. It was not easy to meet such a golden thigh that was easy to hug, and it was so awesome that it could sit on the same level as Green Sun's boss. Would he still be human if he let it go? You're my brother. I, little page of Huai-Hai-Lu, will definitely make friends with you. Looking at his increasingly enthusiastic expression, the gray-clothed man became distressed. Even if you treat me like this, I can't do anything for you. Stopping Huai-Shi, who was about to speak, he sighed. In fact, I'm just an ordinary retired person. I'm not as powerful as that lady said. Please don't have any expectations for me. Besides, even without me with your identity, you can still stay there, right? With that said, he carefully put things like happy drinks and edamame on the briefcase on his knees, raised both hands, and patted the shoulders of the young man in front of him seriously with a solemn expression. You should at least be more confident. Why, sure. Don't underestimate yourself. Holding the young man's shoulders, he said seriously, there's no need to rely on anyone. You're already a big shot. Huai-Shi was confused. He didn't know why this big brother had such a high opinion of him. Didn't they say that people would be punished if they walked in the sky? In short, there's still a little time before we reach the station. The gray-clothed man used the briefcase to pick up the food that Huai-Shi stuffed over, and a warm smile appeared on his pale face. There's too much food. I can't finish it alone. Can we eat together? Such a sincere invitation was far better than any ulterior motives to approach and curry favor. Is there anything you don't understand? Apart from knowing that with the permit, one can perform an ocean jump, I don't understand anything else. Huai-Shi said indifferently. Also, did you throw out a bunch of new settings without warning again? Please call this a step-by-step process, okay? I can't throw an 8 million word hell survival guide at your face the first time we meet, right? Just as Huai-Shi was about to roll her eyes, she felt her body tremble. The scenery outside the window had been replaced by an endless grayish-blue color. It was the sea. The carriage had been smashed into the sea under the guidance of the rails, breaking through layers of seawater and sailing into the depths of the darkness. In the dead silence, only the low roar of the undercurrent in the distance could be heard. The undercurrent jump had begun. No one in the carriage spoke. Everyone felt a heavy chill in their hearts. Only Huai-Shi didn't feel the strange atmosphere around him at all. He was already standing in front of the window, looking up and looking outside. He could only see a dancing grayish blue, gradually dimming, and in an instant it was covered by darkness. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel that the train was madly galloping, as if it was pulled by an invisible rope, getting faster and faster. There were already people in the carriage who couldn't stand still and rolled on the ground. The gray-robed man's movements were fast, as if he was protecting some treasure. He grabbed the peanuts in the food box and bag, opened his mouth wide, and bit the chicken leg flying in the air, then raised his 2 legs and clamped the briefcase. He was in a difficult situation, but he successfully defended the dignity of food. Huai-Shi turned his head and was about to help, but the corner of his eyes glimpsed the endless darkness outside the window. The darkness seemed to squirm. Once a group leader reaches the level of ruler, they have already merged their existence with hell and become a living hell that wanders below the known depths. Such an existence, if placed in 1700 years ago, could already be considered a genuine devil king. As she spoke, she began to rejoice in his misfortune. Congratulations! You've learned a lesson from the archaeological team. Don't look around just because you have good ears and eyes, especially when you have something like the mirror of nihility. This is the range of the ability to deal with after the Fifth Order. The current you is still too young. Huai-Shi's face twitched, and he forced a smile. Yes, I also feel that I'm bearing the burden of being handsome and beautiful that I shouldn't have at my age. You can still talk nonsense. That means you're fine. Crow shook his head. If you still have the strength to raise your head, You can look outside the window now." She said, "We're reaching our destination." Destination? Following her words, Huaisher, the current deep-sea PTSD patient, mustered up his courage and looked out of the window, only to find that the creeping darkness had dissipated. Accompanied by the cheers of all the passengers, the carriage broke out of the sea and came to a dark sea, hanging upside down in the sky. Only a lone lamp hanging on the carriage flickered slowly. It was still moving forward, even if there was nothing in front of it, until Huaisher heard a roar. It was another loud noise breaking out of the sea, accompanied by the waves. A luxurious and ancient carriage broke out of the sea. From hundreds of meters away, he could see the exquisite decorations, warm lights, and even the sound of dance music. Damn. Why was the carriage of others so good, but the one he was sitting in was wrapped in a layer of iron? Before Huaisher could react, loud noises broke out of the sea one after another. Carriage after carriage emerged from all directions, penetrating the obstruction of the deep sea and emerging on the empty sea at this moment. Some were old, some were new, some were broken, and some were complete. Even the era, style, and color of the creation were completely different. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. In the blink of an eye, Huaisher had already lost count of the number of carriages on this sea, a terrifying scale that was enough to move all railway nerds to tears. Countless translucent rails crisscrossed here, exquisitely merged, pieced together, and in the end, the carriages were connected to each other, bursting out with a roar like the tide. In all directions, there was metal constantly colliding with each other, making a pleasant buzzing sound. Some were pieced together, some were parallel, and then Huaisher saw the roof of their carriage suddenly open and spread out to the sides, delicately piecing together with the parallel trains on both sides. It formed a solid ground. Huaisher was shocked from the depths of his soul. Why? Huaisher was confused. Before he could say anything, the gray-robed man took his briefcase and disappeared into the crowd. It wasn't until a few seconds later that he reacted. Wait a minute, why did Big Brother Thigh abandon me and leave? He walked so fast that Huaisher couldn't catch up with him. When Huaisher rushed into the crowd, he could no longer see the tired figure of the gray-robed man. But there was no regret or unwillingness in his heart. Instead, there was a trace of melancholy of seeing off an old friend. If I had known, I would have invited him to eat more. Huaisher sighed and touched his waist bag. There were still a lot of things made by Feng Shu in it. He could have taken a few bags with him. He felt regretful that over time, Maniac actually revealed his work to you. It seems that you get along very well. Crow sighed softly, as if talking to himself. He chuckled softly, but it's the Fine Night Society? Hey, it's really unexpected. Is that little bitch preparing to start trouble again in the past few years? Or is there someone else behind her? Huaisher turned around and glared at this unreliable guy. Even if he resisted in every way in the end, he was still fooled by this guy to come here. As the saying goes, the crow rises 10 feet. There was no other way. He was about to accept his fate. Then what should I do next? Huaisher sighed. Helplessly, the main mission is broken here. Do I have to find the clues myself? Don't worry, there's still a long time. Let's walk around first. Crow shook his head. You're just here for a tour and to collect materials for your advancement. Why do you look like you're ready to risk your life? Who do you think did this to me? Huaisher rolled his eyes and was about to retort when he heard a surprised voice behind him. Why? Sure? He turned around and saw the travelers coming out of the luxurious carriage behind him. Among them, a seemingly familiar young man poked his head out and looked over in disbelief. Why are you here? Who was that? Huaisher froze for a moment. He didn't remember at first. Ah, what a coincidence. Huaisher awkwardly squeezed out a smile. You're not that. The name was at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say it until the young man's expression gradually twitched and reminded him, Yuan Zhao. Oh, Yuan Zhao. Huaisher clapped her hands in surprise and went up to him, enthusiastically holding his hands. Look, isn't this a coincidence? Isn't this a coincidence? As the saying goes, even if Crow closed the door for you, there must be a window that she didn't notice. Wasn't this his good brother, who hadn't appeared in the Book of Destinies for several months? Joy and happiness that couldn't be faked seeped out from his smile. Even Yuan Zhao, who was about to get angry, was stunned in place. Then he felt a little embarrassed. At first, he thought that this bastard had forgotten about him. Chapter 393. Meeting an old friend was an extremely joyous thing, especially in this kind of remote corner of the border, especially when you were about to end up on the streets and starving. Yuan Zhao seemed to have grown a pair of wings as he descended from the sky with a fresh meal ticket. Huaisher couldn't help but feel grateful. I didn't treat you like a good brother in vain. But how did you end up like this? After being disheveled by the sea breeze, he had also been scared into a cold sweat by the Leviathan. If it weren't for the Book of Destiny, his origin substance would have been scattered by that one glance. Huaisher didn't need to look in a mirror to know how haggard he looked. It's a long story. Huaisher sighed. He couldn't say that he had been tricked by the black-hearted crow on his shoulder, could he? He could only change the subject. What about you? I was with... Yuan Zhao's eyes twitched, as if he had finally remembered something. Then, Huaisher heard a cold voice speak from behind him. Zhao, pay attention to your manners. Next to the luggage behind him, the gray-dressed girl raised her head to look at him and asked coldly, You've made everyone wait for so long. Shouldn't you introduce your friends? Only now did Huaisher notice that Yuan Zhao had quite a few companions behind him. They all seemed to be around the same age. Apart from the old attendant behind the girl, there weren't many who were older than Huaisher. However, regardless of whether it was their reserved or luxurious clothing, Huaisher could see the indifference in their casual expressions, as well as the fluctuations coming from their bodies. Damn, these little bastards all had at least 4 or 5 border relics on them. Even their cufflinks had inscriptions carved into them. How rich were they? In particular, the gray-dressed girl's cold eyes were filled with traces of lightning. Huaisher could sense that her origin substance fluctuations were even stronger than Yuan Zhao's. In fact, they were even a bit sharper than Yuan Zhao's. She was actually 8 times as strong as Yuan Zhao's. It was obvious that he respected her greatly. After being reprimanded in front of everyone, the Chinibyu teenager, Yuan Zhao, actually didn't get angry. Instead, he nodded and turned around to introduce her. This is Huaisher. He's my good friend. I met him in the rookie competition. Hearing this, the girl in the gray dress raised her eyes and looked at Huaisher. She didn't know where her younger brother got to know such a strange character. She raised her eyebrows slightly, but didn't show any dissatisfaction. She just nodded at Huaisher reservedly. Then Yuan Zhao introduced his companions one by one to Huaisher. This is my cousin, Yuan. Next to her is Feng Chu. This is Zhao Xinya. This is Wang Su. And this is Hut in the Woods. Huh? Huaisher was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear clearly. Lin what? Yuan Zhao seemed to be used to this kind of thing. He coughed twice and explained, his surname is Lin, and his name is Zhong Huaxia. Nice to meet you. Huaisher nodded at the handsome teenager, who looked like a girl. He really didn't know how his parents' brains worked. How could they give their child such a name? It's okay. I'm used to it. The little hut in the woods smiled warmly and waved at Huaisher warmly. Just call me Little 19. That's what my family calls me. By the way, I don't have a problem with you at all. Huh. Huaisher was puzzled until the teenager who called himself Little 19 reminded him softly, "My surname is Lin." Huaisher's face twitched. Surnamed Lin? Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Don't worry. She is her, and I am me. Lin 19 waved his hand calmly and still smiled. Besides, I'm still young and haven't learned how to offend people. Was there anyone who taught him this? Huaisher felt that it was really an eye-opener. The Lin family was really well educated. Don't worry, the Lin family, how should I say it, is very strange. Yuan Zhao whispered next to him. Although they are disliked everywhere, they never care if their family members are beaten to death outside. It's said that the old man of the Lin family is very optimistic about you and said that it's a pity that you don't take the path of evil. Was the Lin family an alliance of disliked people? Gathering 7 of the most disliked people could make a wish to rule the world. Thinking of this, Huaisher couldn't help but turn around and glare at Crow. Was this the solution you were talking about? They didn't even look into it. But you've already settled it for me? Hurry up and refund my money. Crow blinked innocently. It was as if he was just an ordinary crow and didn't know what he was talking about. After the introductions, everyone knew each other. Yuan Zhao enthusiastically invited Huaisher to join them. Huaisher was thinking about sponsored partnerships, so he naturally hit it off. However, except for Lin Shizhou, the others were obviously uninterested in Huaisher. After that, they became cold and acted as if they didn't see him. Wang Su, who was walking in front, almost laughed out loud when he saw Huaisher's outfit. He whispered something to Zhao Xinya. Zhao Xinya turned around and looked at Huaisher. She couldn't help but punch his shoulder while trying to stifle her laughter. How can you say that about him? Yuan Zhao frowned. When he looked at Huaisher, he was a little embarrassed and whispered, "Many of my sister's classmates are idiots. Don't lower yourself to their level." Huaisher didn't feel anything. He just felt that he wasn't very popular. He wasn't angry. When he was performing with his cello, he had heard worse things than this many times. Money was hard to earn, and shit tasted bad. If they all got angry because of a few words, they would have died long ago. Besides, it was so convenient to follow them. They could directly go through the VIP channel and didn't have to line up. It was so convenient. And there was a big meal to eat later. What a bargain! At worst, he would use his appetite to teach these young people a lesson and teach them that you can't judge a book by its cover. Thinking of food, he took out the edamame from his pocket and gave Yuan Zhao some so that he could try it when he had time. Yuan Zhao didn't mind. He took it and asked, "Where did you buy it? Why didn't I see it in the car?" "Ah, I made it myself and brought it with me," Huaisher answered casually. Then he saw the shoulders of the people walking in front of him shake, as if they were holding back laughter. Only Yuan Zhao's face turned green when he thought of the damn thing Huaisher made in the last live broadcast. He held a bag of things in his hand and didn't know whether to eat it or not. "Don't worry." Huaisher shook his head. "I learned this from Feng Shu. You won't die from eating it. It's just that there's a little too much salt. Drink more water when you eat. Okay." He accepted Huaisher's gift skeptically, fearing that this bastard wanted to harm him. Obviously, the last live broadcast didn't just create a patient with abyssal food phobia. After all, not everyone had such a good appetite as the judges of the Cooking Demon competition. The two of them walked at the back of the line and deliberately distanced themselves from the others. Seeing Huaisher quickly stuffing snacks into his mouth, Yuan Zhao couldn't help but shake his head. "Don't eat too much. We made a reservation for the abyssal level here at noon. Don't eat too much. Don't worry." Huaisher waved his hand. "I can do it," puffed There was a faint laughter in front of them. Wang Su turned around and glanced at Huaishir. He asked Yuan Zhao with a faint smile, "How about we change to a cheaper restaurant at noon? This way, your friend can eat more comfortably." "Don't talk like that." Zhao Xinya gently hammered him. He shook his head indifferently. "Wang Su, I've given you face, haven't I?" Yuan Zhao rubbed his gums and suddenly raised his eyebrows. "I've tolerated your nonsense all the way. How about I simply train you here?" The fierceness that had been suppressed by his cousin for a long time emerged slightly. Wang Su's smile stiffened. When he was about to say something, a sudden sharp sound burst out. A deep hoof print appeared on the floor beside him, wedged into the iron stone. The sound was sharp. It was only one step away from him. It stopped abruptly. "Don't be angry." Huaishir pressed his shoulder and shook his head. "It's just a meal. There's no need to quarrel over this. We can make an appointment another day." There was no need to watch a group of children fight over this. Face was not earned in this way. Although there was only a few years between them, in Huaishir's view, these overt and covert taunts were still too childish. Probably those who really annoyed him were chopped to death by him, right? Today's Huaishir was simply too calm. Yuan Zhao still wanted to say something, but he saw Huaishir waving his hand and kicking his bag to leave. Wang Su did not appreciate it. Instead, he snorted twice, turned around, and continued to walk forward with his friends. Only Yuan Zhao remained in the same place. "What are you waiting for? Zhao?" He heard his cousin's urging voice. He opened his mouth to say something, but in the end, he hung his head dejectedly and followed. But Yuan stood in the same place and did not move. Instead, he tilted his head and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong? You abandoned your friend, just like that. Didn't I just tell you to pay attention to etiquette?" Yuan shook his head and sighed unhappily. "Won't you be with him?" "Ah." Yuan Zhao was stunned for a long time and did not react. Then he was surprised and incredulous. Then, "I'm leaving?" Yuan sighed again and turned back to say, "Uncle Ping, give him some money, but not too much. Come back before 9 o'clock, okay?" The latter part of the sentence was directed at Yuan Zhao. Yuan Zhao nodded crazily. It was not clear whether he heard it or not. Like a child on vacation, after taking the money, he ran directly to Huaishir like a wild dog out of its leash. He even winked at him proudly and beamed with joy, meaning that he would take him to Kong Kang's things in the afternoon. "No, you're leaving the team just like that." Huaishir was stunned. "Anyway, they're my sister's classmates. They're not close to me." Yuan Zhao shrugged indifferently, lifted his small chin, and said proudly, "Let's go. I'm the big brother anyway. Today, I'll take you to live the life of a rich person." Huaishir laughed and thought about the few £100 of pure gold in his bag. Well, it was better not to take it out to break his little brother's self-confidence. Bang! A crisp sound suddenly burst out, and the entire train station suddenly shook for a moment. Huaishir's footsteps stopped. The ground was moving. He and Yuan Zhao looked at each other, with the sound of steel rubbing against each other. Right in front of Huaishir, the original exit of the station, together with the whole huge wall, instantly disintegrated and shrank into the floor, disappearing. It was incredible. The whole Stellaris was like a machine that could be assembled at will. It could slide, change shape, rise or fall at will, forming a new space and structure. At this moment, with the disintegration of the wall, the spacious space outside the station, like a street, was revealed. Even if there was no sky, there was still a soft light replacing the existence of the sun, sprinkling pure light. The bustling street was surging with people. Excited tourists walked through the streets, talking about where to go next. At this moment, They were also stunned by this scene. They looked back in shock. Then, they saw the place where the exit of the station was, a huge carriage that was a little too big. Pulled by 4 vigorous and huge black horses, the pitch-black carriage just existed there, as if there was an invisible gravitational force, pulling everyone's gaze, making them carefully look at the exquisite and luxurious carriage, understanding the solemnity. In front of the carriage, a tall and straight old man dressed in formal wear, holding an ivory cane, looked up at the inside of the station. His green eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, sweeping across the faces of the tourists one by one. Then his eyes lit up, and he rushed over with big strides. That speed was just like collecting a debt, afraid that if he was a step late, the guy who borrowed the debt would run away. Weisher was shocked. He couldn't help but give the old man a thumbs up. Debt collection should be like this, swift and decisive, until he found that under the gaze of everyone, the old man was coming straight for him. He had an ominous premonition. Did Crow borrow money here behind his back? Can't you think of me a little better? Crow sighed. He's here for you. With a crisp sound, the cane fell to the ground. The old man had already stood 3 steps in front of Weisher and bowed. Welcome, Your Excellency Weisher. He took off his hat reverently and respectfully. Please forgive this old man for being late. The concert hall prepared for you by the Hells United Music Association has been cleaned, and we look forward to your arrival. Huh. Weisher's expression twitched. How did you know I was here? Great. He felt that when he went out, his itinerary was leaked everywhere. 5 minutes before the train entered the station, we saw your registered information in the passenger directory. After confirming with the headquarters, we immediately applied for an exclusive venue for you from the supervisor. Unfortunately, time was tight, and we couldn't prepare a welcoming ceremony. The old man answered solemnly, raised his hand to guide his gorgeous carriage, and said enthusiastically, "If you don't mind, please take this old man's carriage. Please rest assured, even if only one person comes, the noble identity of a calamity musician must be highlighted." Weisher's expression twitched. In the silence, Yuan Zhao raised his eyes and glanced at his dull traveling companions not far away, and asked in a low voice, "Hey, Weisher, you're not deliberately playing some trick, are you?" I'm not, I don't know." Weisher hurriedly waved his hand and glared at him. "You're so young. Why do you read so many online novels? You should study more, understand?" Haha. The top student of Jixia Junior class cast a pitiful look at a certain trash who could only mix in a special class. "You're so awesome. This lunch is on you." Out of his understanding of Weisher, he said directly, "Don't fool me with Sha County. Take out something better." "You're daydreaming." Weisher rolled his eyes. 50 per person, no more." Yuan Zhao was furious. "Sure enough. You bastard, seeing how enthusiastic I am, you want a freeload, right?" Immediately after, he felt a huge shadow looming over him. A burly figure appeared behind him. The bald man was wearing a brown Ingzhou robe, and there were tattoos of Yiksha on his neck and face. His head was bald, and he looked very fierce. As if there was no one else around, he pushed the ticket inspector aside and bowed deeply to Weisher at a 90-degree angle. He handed over a letter with both hands. His voice was loud and clear like a clap of thunder, scaring Yuan Zhao. "Ah, you are. Who are you?" Weisher found the tattoo rather familiar. After flipping through the Book of Destiny, he suddenly recalled the chef's apprentice who had poured wine for him beside head chef Watanabe at Yamatai. Grass. He couldn't believe it. "How did you suddenly become so strong? How is Mr. Watanabe?" "Thank you for your concern. I am very grateful." Grass replied with a loud voice that made people's ears hurt. The master craftsman has been promoted to 3 stars in Tengu Mountain and was given the name Dragon Mountain Restaurant by Date Tengu. Now he is invited to stay on Chuxing ship. He is very happy to hear that you are coming and hopes that you can spare some time to meet him. A handwritten letter was lifted and moved closer to him, eagerly attentive. Who was it that said I wanted to freeload? In the silence, Huaisha reached out and took the invitation letter and turned back to Yuan Zhao with a proud grin. Do you know what a big shot is, brother? Yuan Su could only roll his eyes after being thoroughly showcased. When he was useful, he called him Big Brother, and when he was useless, he treated him as a little brother. What a scum. Finally, I feel a little like a tourist. Huaisha looked around and sighed softly. Suddenly, he recalled the words that the gray-clothed man had said to him, and finally had a little personal experience of his respected identity. A big shot who didn't need to rely on anyone. He didn't need to think about hugging anyone's thigh anymore. Instead, he was actually walking on the road to become a golden thigh that others dreamed of hugging. He was getting stronger little by little. Gradually, he was different from his former down-and-out self. Even if it was different from the meteoric rise in his fantasy, he now had achievements that he could hold his head high and boast to others. Even compared to those huge, great undertakings, this achievement still seemed a little small. But there was no doubt that he had taken a solid first step, and there were more scenery waiting for him to enjoy in front of him. So, since everyone gave him so much face, it didn't hurt to be arrogant occasionally, right? Thinking of this, the boy flipped his messy hair coquettishly, put his hand on Yuan Zhao's shoulder, and waved his hand. Let's go. Huaisha grinned. Big Brother will take you to sponsored partnerships. As he spoke, Lin Shurjo suddenly turned around and glanced indifferently at Zhao Xinya, who was about to speak, causing her to swallow back the words she was about to say to ease the atmosphere. Looking back at Wang Su's enlarged pupils, Lin Shurjo sneered. Do you think he cares about the Wang family? 2 months ago, the Yin family was just as you thought. The Yin old master died a horrible death at his 100th birthday banquet. After that, he even tried to take his superior hostage and tried to escape. At least 8 third-order people died in his hands. This was suppressed by the Central Bureau. Who do you think you are? If he's even a little bit dissatisfied with me because of Lin Yu, I'll be prepared to apologize to him. If he wants me to kneel, not only will I kneel, but I'll also be prepared to lick his shoes because I don't want to die in such a funny way like that idiot Lin Yu. So, let's be clear about one thing. The reason why he didn't chop your head off in front of us is not because of the Wang family, but also because of Yuan Zhao. It's because you didn't provoke him. He doesn't care about you, just like how people don't care when a dog barks next to them. Lin 19 leaned over and whispered in his ear, I don't ask you to keep your eyes open, but please don't take me with you next time. I'm only 15 years old. I'm still young and haven't lived long enough. In the silence, Wang Su's expression changed. In the end, he didn't say anything. He just turned around and walked in front with an ashen face. After Lin 19 finished speaking, he slowed down with a strange look of satisfaction and walked behind them. He seemed to be in a good mood. Only Yuan glanced at him coldly, as if warning him. He squeezed out an awkward and innocent smile, put his hands together, and promised that he wouldn't do it again. But in fact, it was fake. He would dare to do it again, next time. Received 299 points of distress from Wang Su, received 210 points of distress from Zhao Xinyu. If there was a strange system in the novel, such a notification would have appeared in front of the cabin in the forest. But in fact, there was no need for such a system to remind him. He could feel the endless resentment from Wang Su. It was like a luxurious and exquisite lunch, which made him happy. In fact, Lin 19 lied to Huai Shi. Although he said that he hadn't learned how to offend people, it was because he was a self-taught genius. Since he was 6 years old, his family didn't have anything to teach him. In addition to his extraordinary talent, this kid was too annoying. Even in the Lin family, which was full of villains, 19 was a strange anomaly, a freak. Since he was a child, he seemed to look down on the criminal records of his family. He even sneered at them. In his opinion, it was not worth risking his life for the sake of someone else's hatred and resentment. It was not cost-effective at all. Compared with the deep hatred of getting rich overnight, he preferred to plant a lot and have a small harvest. Like a farmer, he slowly enjoyed the long-term joy of harvest after a long period of sowing and working. Disregarding the fact that his peers who had already begun to commit crimes outside had already left him far behind for a long period of time, he had been leisurely wandering around the first level, neither moving up nor down, refusing to move up. He did not even touch any evil that would endanger his life if he were to be exposed. Instead, he put all his energy into bad things like, even if he was exposed, he would just be beaten up. Don't be a villain who made enemies of the whole world, but be a delicate and self-serving stumbling block. This was his life creed. Even if he was a stumbling block after being overturned, he would just be slapped in the face and kicked. A stumbling block was still a stumbling block, and he could continue to play with the next person. It was safe, harmless, annoying, but not hateful, except for the excessive care and unrealistic expectations of his grandfather. Lin 19's life was as peaceful as any stumbling block. Hang a cheap plagiarist. Let's change the color palette first. Rubbish author. What the hell is he writing? I'm going to follow the exorcist next door. Myanmar has universal health care, free electricity, and free democratic air. Do you idiots understand? Even in the short time after getting out of the car, he didn't forget to continue to add bricks and tiles to his great cause. Today, the account, Take My Junior Brother, with 900,000 fans, was also in business. Every time he clicked send, he could feel countless small evils constantly emerging. A little makes a mickle piled up into a mountain. It caused him to be like an old farmer gazing at a golden pile of rice, and he was almost moved to the point of tears. This kind of safe and disgusting life of doing evil was too wonderful. So, stay away from the enemy. Stay away from the turmoil. Stay away from Huaishir. He wanted to be an annoying person who lived a peaceful life. In the carriage, Huaishir sneezed without warning. Did you catch a cold? Yuan Zhao subconsciously moved to the side a little. Something that could make a sublimator catch a cold was not a good thing. It would be troublesome if it was some kind of border flu. My body is super healthy, okay? Huaishir shook his head and murmured doubtfully, I always feel like someone is talking about me. This is an illusion after being arrogant, who has nothing to do but to think about you. Yuan Zhao rolled his eyes. After half a day, he almost had a whole basket of lemons. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have greeted this bastard. The thickness of his face as a normal person couldn't be compared with this mutated person in front of him. It was simply annoying. Originally, he was worried that Huaishir would be in trouble on the streets. In the end, seeing how well he was doing, he knew that this guy could live well even if he was thrown into hell. Maybe, with this guy's brain circuit, even if he encountered a destructive factor, he would rush up and call him brother. Yuan Zhao's heart suddenly had a conjecture that even he himself found comical, but he immediately rejected it. Ahaha! Even if it was a joke, it was too exaggerated. How could it be? At this moment, the carriage came to an abrupt stop. Soon, the old gentleman driving the carriage knocked on the door and said respectfully, Sir Huaishir, we have arrived. At the door, a group of apprentices surrounded Chef Watanabe, who had changed greatly. They had been waiting for a long time. Everyone seemed to be at least the same size, and their voices were frighteningly loud. The uniform greeting could be heard from 2 streets away. Greetings after a long time. Huaishir, Kun! As soon as Huaishir got out of the carriage, Chef Watanabe came up and warmly shook his hand. What a rare fate to be able to meet you again. Since he was giving him face, Huaishir naturally couldn't reject it. He also made the necessary etiquette. After not seeing each other for a long time, Chef Watanabe, no, the current Tengu Longshan restaurant, was even more enthusiastic than before. He firmly believed that it was Huaishir who gave him good luck. It was precisely because he drew inspiration from his previous dishes that Watanabe was able to obtain a promotion in Tengu Mountain's harsh examination with a dish called Tengu's Blood. Please accept my sincerity. After saying such words, Huaishir was even too embarrassed to pay the bill. He could only sit at the main table and watch the dishes being served like flowing water. Compared to the legendary Heavenly Dog Feast, that even evil spirits would be satisfied, there were 14 side dishes, 5 seasonal vegetables, and 6 types of cooked food. As for the roasted food, covered food, and other dishes, Huaishir had already lost count of them. Even Tengu's fine wine had 7 types. Although there wasn't much of each type, they were all exquisite and satisfying. All of them were specially served to Huaishir's mountain ghost physique. It was difficult to refuse such kindness, but Huaishir felt ashamed. After thinking for a long time, he opened his saddlebag. Sorry, I haven't cooked for a long time. Huaishir took out 3 boxes and placed them in front of Longshan restaurant. However, an elder in my family made a lot of food for me before I left. Although it's not some abyss delicacy, please have a taste. Yuan Zhao was disappointed that he didn't see Wu Neng's enraged and jealous expression, but he still nodded reluctantly. I'll ask for you, but don't think too much. Cousin doesn't lack anything, and even if she did, you wouldn't be able to help. Who knows, right? Huaishir laughed. Even if it's a mountain of daggers or a sea of flames, I won't hesitate. TSK, you're really putting in a lot of effort. I'm just repaying a debt of gratitude. How is it that I'm a scumbag now? Do you have some kind of misunderstanding about my character? Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Yuan Zhao shook his head and sighed. I was lucky to have met you this time. Last time, I was too suicidal and was watched closely by my family. I couldn't even leave the house. Now that I'm finally out, I have to be accompanied by trash who only knows how to play with women every day. It's so annoying. You're all here on vacation? That's right. Cousin recently finished her studies at Jisha University, and before she went to school, a few of her classmates urged her to come out and play together. That idiot Wang Su's eyeballs almost fell under her feet, and Feng Chu, TSK, both of them don't know what's good for them. If I knew her true colors, I don't know how I'd be played to death. Yuan Zhao seemed to have been traumatized by his cousin, and he couldn't help but tremble as he spoke of this. Soon after, he shook his head frantically. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Are you also here to play? I'm trying my luck to find an advancement material. Huaisher shrugged. I'm all alone and can only be a tool in the Astronomy Society. How can I compare to the treatment of the Dongxia branch? I can only work hard. He. Yuan Zhao sneered and rolled his eyes out of habit. Did he not know how developed Huaisher was now? He was practically the only seedling in the Dongxia branch, the #1 rising star of the new generation. It was said that even the headquarters of the Central Bureau paid attention to him and treasured him to no end. As long as Huaisher asked for an advancement material, would the Central Bureau not be willing to give it to him? They would probably give him 2 sets of everything. Moreover, didn't the giant goose sponsor the rookie competition prize? Only a fool would believe him. Huaisher was still crying out of habit. When I go out for a trip, I have to buy a standing ticket. How can it be as good as your luxury box? I had to sit on a folding stool all the way from Shurching to here. My ass must have been skinned. Wait, where are you talking about? Yuan Zhao was stunned for a moment before his eyes widened. Shurching? That's right, what's wrong? Then you're really lucky. Yuan Zhao's expression became strange. He picked up his phone, flipped through it a few times, and handed it to him. Tomorrow's news headlines in Asia. Emergency rescue, Shurching evacuation. What the hell? Although the price of this nostalgia was slightly high, Huaisher didn't say anything when he thought of how his teacher used to take care of him. Perhaps apart from Ai Qing, this cello that she gave him was her most precious treasure. No matter what, Huaisher had to take good care of it. After settling one of his worries, Huaisher began to look forward to the next itinerary. It was his first long-distance trip. After getting rid of the inexplicable sense of crisis, everything was fresh. It was a pity that this was not a holy place for recuperation or vacation. Once a year, the Stellaris would sail across the endless sea. In terms of scenery, there was nothing special about it. Of course, there would not be any lofty mountains or precipitous ridges inside. In particular, there were no stations along the way. They would only stop at the sea to welcome passengers on board, so there was no need to talk about getting on and off to enjoy the beautiful scenery of various places. In addition to the unique charm of the train, it only had one irreplaceable advantage. It was tax-free. That's right, there was no tax at all. It was impossible for any lineage or power to extract any tax from the transaction of goods. Even the train operator itself would not charge a cent more than the fixed booth fee. Thanks to the strength and means of the operator, no matter where the goods came from or what kind of treasure was obtained from hell, as long as it could be transported here, then it was a commodity that could be sold openly. The entire Stellaris was a large black market in East Asia that was held once a year. Just thinking about how huge the amount of money flowing here at all times made him feel a little suffocated. Not only smuggled goods and illegal goods, but major workshops and enterprises would also hold a wave of promotions at this time of the year. Excluding the border tax that sometimes went as high as 300% and the hidden exploitation of the various pedigrees, some of the goods sold here were no longer cheap but cheap. They could be described as the price of a drop off the building. Although there were crooks mixed in with honest folks, and huge scams occurred every year, as long as one was careful, they could still find a lot of good stuff. No wonder so many tourists flocked to this place. After understanding the situation, even Huaishur could not help but want to pick up some scraps. Moreover, this was a good opportunity to get rid of the set of folding knives. Thinking of the small amount of money that was waving at him, Huaishur's mood suddenly became cheerful. End of the second update. Monthly votes Mua. Chapter 396. The most important thing is that there are auctions for relics and materials from the border every day. You can start preparing to spend a lot of money to compete with others or to drive up the prices. For some reason, Huaishur felt that Yuan Zhao's tone was mocking him. He laughed and didn't care. How old was he? How could he be angry because of this? Well, he just made a note of it in the Book of Destiny. His purpose this time was very simple. He wanted to get rid of the stolen goods and find if there were any items related to his advancement. Then he would take out the money and buy them. After that, he would buy some gifts for Uncle Fong, some gifts for Crow, the cheap ones, some gifts for Fu Yi, and finally a bottle of hair growth fluid for Old Lu. He would go on his way happily and return home safely. Finally, he would enjoy a peaceful advancement without any accidents. It's done. What a beautiful plan. Just thinking about it made Huaishur so moved that he almost shed tears. After eating and drinking, Huaishur didn't rest for long before he was pulled up by Yuan Zhao, who rarely had freedom. They went straight to the busiest fourth floor and looked for the largest relic market on the entire Stellaris according to other people's travel guides. In 4 days and 3 nights, not only the major alchemy workshops and technical workshops in the world, but even merchants from hell would appear here. As long as you had money, you could always find something good. After obtaining the Dung Cough Cough, the trident, Yuan Zhao no longer lacked weapons. However, he intended to use this opportunity to exchange for a few defensive relics and see if he could find some good armor and horseshoes while he was at it. Horseshoes what? Huaishur's expression became strange. Horseshoes. Horseshoes what? Huaishur, that's enough. Yuan Zhao glared at him. It's not what you think. Huaishur looked at him innocently. How do you know what I'm thinking? I've been looking for so long, I still don't know what you're thinking. Yuan Zhao was angry. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. The trident was in front of his face. Huaishur didn't dare to speak. He could only shrug helplessly. However, she still couldn't help but imagine the scene of Yuan Zhao crossing his legs and pinning the horseshoes on the soles of her feet. It really hurt my eyes. Yuan Zhao always felt that once he tried to explain, he would become an honest person who was bullied. He didn't even have the strength to explain. For the Celestial Horse clan's stigmata, a good set of armor or horseshoes was definitely a rare supplement. These horseshoes, whether blessed or cursed, could be directly converted into origin substance and assimilated into the sacred mote, turning into a unique arm that could provide the ascendant with all sorts of benefits. A set of 4 iron floating horseshoes that had been preserved to this day could not only provide the sublimator with a layer of shockingly sturdy origin substance armor, but also allow the sublimator's every attack to have the effect of breaking armor and strengthening armor. Yuan Zhao's fourth uncle, on the other hand, had been incredibly lucky during his exploration of the infernal realm. He had unearthed a full set of White Horse Righteous Followers armor, which had the ability to fly and increase speed. In addition, It also had a 24-hour excitement buff. As soon as the battle began, it would automatically ignore all abnormal effects, making it immune to poison and inexhaustible in battle. For the Celestial Horse Clan's sublimators, what they desired the most wasn't equipment or weapons, but rather a set of armor and horseshoes that were compatible with them. If they could obtain one, it would definitely be like adding wings to a tiger. Unfortunately, there weren't many sublimators in the Celestial Horse Clan, and epic-grade armor that had been preserved to this day was far too rare. As soon as they were unearthed, they would often be snatched up by sublimators before they could even be put on the market. Trying to find one through normal means was like looking for a needle in a haystack. He could only hope to pick up some scraps. Yuan Zhao didn't even dare to think about finding an armor all of a sudden. He could only hope that his luck was good, and that he would be able to find a few horseshoes that would increase his attack power. Huaishir, on the other hand, didn't quite understand. Your family wouldn't have prepared something like that for you, right? My grandfather prepared a set of arcane armor for me, but the style isn't very suitable for me. I prefer fourth uncle's speed-type armor. Yuan Zhao sighed. If only I could find some armor left behind by cavalry like the ferocious cavalry. Fine, this was a person who had meat in his bowl, but was still looking at the pot. Huaishir pursed his lips. He felt that being rich and overbearing really was amazing. The fourth floor of the astral ship was a pedestrian street that took up all of the available space. After coming up from the elevator, it was possible to see a surging tide of people. Sublimators were coming and going, and heads were moving everywhere. The shops and stalls on both sides constantly pulsed with origin substance. Some of the shops were filled with a modern aura, while others were like antique shops. There were even some that had laid out a piece of cloth on the ground and placed their wares on it. Even here, the Cavendish workshop still occupied the most conspicuous position and had the largest area. Next to it were Giant Goose, Wanli, and other large organizations that spanned across the present realm and the border. The Cavendish workshop had one good thing about it. It had everything that one needed, and it also had all kinds of high, low, and low-grade items. Even if someone walked in with an empty wallet, they could still touch and feel the happiness of the local tyrants. But apart from that, it was more of a display center for goods. It didn't spend any effort on retail, but rather focused on large orders. Here, unless you spent a lot of money on custom-made items, it was very difficult to buy anything other than a standard item. But fortunately, even a standard item was enough for the vast majority of sublimators, and it was quite cost-effective. Giant Goose, Wanli, and other large organizations didn't have the same technical ability, but they had a wide range of channels. Many alchemists would consign their works here, and at the same time, they would also sell all kinds of items purchased from the border archaeological teams. It was equivalent to a huge second-hand dealer, and there was always a surprise waiting for you. And the only drawback was every item that was put up for sale would definitely be appraised by hundreds of appraisers. From the effects to the defects, everything was clear. There was absolutely no possibility of bargaining or picking up scraps. If you want to buy, then buy. If you don't want to buy, then get lost. In addition, there were small shops and street stalls where the protagonists would often pick up artifacts in various novels. Generally, they weren't big, and some of the poorer ones only had one or two relics to display and sell. Here, risk and opportunity coexisted. It was just that the risk of being cheated was definitely hundreds of times greater than the opportunity, but there was no lack of young people who were full of Chinibu in their hearts. Yes, just like Yuan Zhao, who believed that he had a pair of protagonist's eyes and carried the protagonist's fate and luck. From the time he opened his eyes until now, he had been waiting for 14 years and 11 months to pick up an artifact from a street stall. However, in Huaishir's view, most of the things here were ordinary goods. Not to mention the influence of Crow, Even if it was just the astronomical meeting, his knowledge had already surpassed most sublimators. Not to mention the large pile of weapons he had on hand. There wasn't a single one that was lower than an S grade. It was difficult to hide the disdain in front of stalls that bragged about the effects of a B-grade item and wanted to sell it for an S-grade price. If he encountered someone who wanted to pester him to sell something, he would pull out the sword of virtue and show it to them, and those who had a bit of insight would retreat. But this didn't mean that small shops couldn't take it. In fact, there were quite a few good things, but all of them were called for sky-high prices. There were even more relics that had an extremely strong, ominous aura, especially the bracelet that Yuan Zhao casually picked up. You're right. Huaisha nodded. In any case, she still had a few hundred gene of pure gold on her. As the saying goes, the son of a wealthy family does not sit under the awning. Her 500 gene of pure gold was also quite precious, so she could not just pick up random things. The main thing was that he remembered that the thing he picked up last time seemed to be the Book of Destiny. Since then, he had become the #1 trader of the Astronomy Association. If he picked up such a thing again, he wouldn't be able to live. After making up his mind, he pulled the curious Yuan Zhao and turned around to leave. Only Crow looked back at the mirror on the ground with a faint smile. In the mirror, the bustling Stellaris was reflected. But in the reflection, everything had become a bloody mess, with countless blister-like cysts and deformities growing out of the walls of the carriage. Squirming eyes were constantly opening and closing, looking down indifferently at the hideous scene. The whole world seemed to have turned into a horror movie in an instant, but in the next moment, as Crow flapped his wings, the mirror suddenly broke. It turned into dust. The rest of the stroll was nothing to write home about. Only a few relics from the border and a few large workshops made people's eyes light up. Unfortunately, without exception, they were all too expensive. Even the display items were only projections. If one wanted to buy them, the shop would send them directly to the customer's home via yesterday's express delivery, saving the customer all the trouble. Among them, the one that Huaisha coveted the most was a dagger that seemed to be made of crystal. This relic, named Mother, was excavated from a hellish mine last year. It was a weapon formed naturally in the hellish environment. Once someone was grazed or pierced by this weapon, new gemstone clusters would continuously grow out of the wound until all of the origin substance in the injured person was sucked dry, turning him into a crystal deposit. Unless a higher-level relic weapon was used to forcibly gouge out the wound and the crystal clusters that had penetrated deep into the bone marrow, there was no chance of survival. It could be said to be vicious. The only drawback was that it would subtly transform the user, causing the user to unknowingly begin to crystallize. After reaching a certain limit, the entire person would merge into this crystal dagger and become a part of it, causing the mother to grow by a negligible millimeter or two. In order to avoid this trouble, the shop bought one and got one free with an extra modification surgery, covering the bones of the buyer's dominant hand with an extremely thin layer of cursed plating, fighting poison with poison, restraining the corrosion of the mother's dagger. In any case, the thick brochure made Huaisha suck in a few breaths of cold air. He was deeply moved that people nowadays would really do anything for power. Countless illusory granules began to grow out of the origin substance, waving wildly in all directions, almost brushing past his mask as they flew past. It made him stagger a few steps back and almost fell into the deep sea. You F***ing. Are you kidding me? Tony did not know whether he was still conscious or had been captured by an illusion. He could not believe what he saw in front of him. What was this? A nightmare? This is the thing that really destroyed Searching's framework. Over the radio, the voice trembled slightly. That thing is too huge. when it did not deliberately restrain its power. Even if it was just passing by, it could completely distort the framework of the stone city. With such a deep silhouette, it should be at least the leader of a large group, but it is precisely because of that it is even more puzzling. What do you not understand? Tony asked in annoyance. Do you not understand why it came out to eat but did not choose to order takeout? No, Tony, it's more exaggerated than that. The person in the channel was silent for a long time before telling him in a low voice, it did not go out to eat, but to escape. It is already injured. It should be dying. It is simply dying. In the dead silence, no one spoke again. Only Tony felt a constant buzzing in his head, as if it was laughing sharply and mockingly. It shouted loudly in his ear, "Idiot, idiot, idiot." He had always thought that he had found the problem, but in fact, he did not. But now he knew that the problem had finally come. However, he was unable to withstand it. A ruler, that was enough to destroy Shurching, just by passing by. What forced it into this situation? Even if he used his heel to think, he would know. Something big happened. Chapter 399. Idiot! Something big is going to happen. What? Huaishur's head was filled with question marks. He had no idea what was going on. Wasn't everything fine just now? It was fine, but that doesn't mean that something big is going to happen. Crow stared at him with wide eyes. Are you still dreaming that you'll be able to go home safely? Who the hell told me that this was a tour bus? Huaishur stared at her with grief and indignation. Where's the door? I want to get off. You want to get off? Don't worry. There's an express train leaving the island in 3 hours. You can still make it if you buy a ticket now. As long as you're fast, you'll be able to escape. Huh. Huaishur's eyes widened. He didn't understand why she didn't push him into a fire pit this time. Crow paused for a moment and revealed a curious expression. But are you really going to ignore the reaction of the Book of Destiny? Huaishur stuttered for a long time, but he couldn't bring himself to say, I'm really going to ignore it. Moreover, he had already smelled something really fragrant. Could it be that there really is a fragment of heaven here? Crow nodded. Most likely. To be honest, I still don't understand what's going on. Huaishur clasped his hands together. Can a beautiful big sister explain it to me? Crow smiled. You've asked the right person. Huaishur's mouth twitched. To be honest, I thought you would be modest. Don't big sisters look good? Crow tilted her head and glanced at him. Her casual tone caused Huaishur's premonition of death to faintly awaken. Yes, yes. Huaishur nodded. Yuan Zhao scrutinized so frequently him for a long that his brain was half about to believing explode. And half doubting. Follow your heart. That's right. After all, you don't look like the kind of person who would That's pay. Right. Then hurry which group do I belong to? Crow landed on his shoulder. Money? Little brother, there's still time. Don't you Let's think hurry you've up misunderstood and buy some things a bit too Why much? Are you in such a hurry? In any case, I don't mind. I'm very sorry that I'm going to have to stand you up this afternoon. But things might change if you're late. You understand? Huaishur apologized. Okay. I How understand. About tomorrow or the day after? If Huaishur quickened his pace. I'll take care of you. His sense of urgency as a tool after seeing finally that Huaishur's sincerity Before and apology were genuine. Huaishur had to go to the lounge of the giant goose chamber of commerce to find graciously, who had been waiting for him for 2 hours. But I have to hesitating for a long time. I don't have free time. He put his hands together and apologized. Huaishur patted his shoulder gratefully. Something urgent came up and turned to leave. I have to go. But when he reached the door, Yuan Zhao, his hand that was on the door his phone to decide where to go next, suddenly was stunned. He was reminded of a question. Soon after, was it really a coincidence that he had such a sudden reunion that there are a lot of young ladies standing under pink lights? Did someone have other plans in the basement too? After sensing the impending storm, you're not thinking of sending me away to do some dirty adult to get nervous. Are you? He turned back to ask. What the hell is wrong with your brain? Speaking of which, Huaishur couldn't spit out a mouthful of blood. Yuan Zhao glared at him. Didn't I tell you my cousin is going to graduate, so we're here to celebrate. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is who suggested and made the decision for you to come here. Weisher said seriously, "This matter is very important. Yuan Zhao scratched his head for a long time and said with uncertainty, "I think it was that bootlicker Feng Chu who suggested it." Weisher thought back to the young man who stood quietly beside Yuan during the day. He always had a warm smile on his face and stood beside Yuan enthusiastically, but he always maintained a distance that was not annoying. He did not seem to be estranged or repulsed by Weisher. He could even be called a gentleman. It was him. Weisher frowned. "But at the time, my cousin didn't seem very interested." Yuan, Zhao said with emotion, "but it's no wonder that she suddenly agreed the next day. Hey, don't be fooled by her cold appearance. In fact, she's very cooped up at home. If there's nothing important, she will never go out. This time, she actually took the initiative to go on a trip, which gave me a shock." Weisher didn't say anything. "What's wrong?" Yuan Zhao asked. "No, nothing." Weisher shook his head. He couldn't conclude anything based on this, but it was inevitable that a shadow would rise in his heart. If Yuan Zhao's arrival was related to what was going to happen next, what should he do then? The sense of urgency grew stronger. "Take care of yourself." Weisher finally turned back and cautiously reminded him, "Be careful to stay in a place with a mobile phone signal. If you encounter anything, don't resist. If there's an accident, quickly call Big Cousin for help. Understand?" Yuan Zhao didn't understand, but Weisher had already left quickly. Time and tide wait for no man. By the time Yuan Zhao returned to the hotel that night, it was already 10 o'clock. There was nothing he could do about it. The universe star was just too fun. How could a 14-year-old who had been cooped up at home for 2 months endure this? He had just participated in an offline competition organized by the Border Entertainment Association, and it was already 10:40. Yuan Zhao carried bags of prizes and a few movable origin substance models that he had always wanted but never had the money to buy. He hummed and danced as he walked into his room, put down the things, and turned on the lights. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. He saw the slender figure sitting in the living room, drinking tea. Yuan. Sis, Yuan Zhao's legs trembled as he squeezed out an awkward smile. "You haven't slept yet?" Yuan lowered her head to look at the watch on her wrist, then raised her head to look at her younger cousin. She suddenly asked, "Why did you come back so late? You didn't forget about the curfew, did you?" It's all Weisher's fault for being too enthusiastic. Yuan Zhao scratched his head and looked around. "He insisted on dragging me along to eat and drink. I couldn't even chase him away. Is that so?" The silent young girl nodded her head in understanding and asked, "Did you have fun?" Yes. Yuan Zhao nodded his head crazily and smiled, fawningly. "I promise it'll be just this once today. Sis, don't tell my mom." "I promise I won't." "Then, did he say anything special to you?" Yuan interrupted him and suddenly asked, "Did he ask you any questions?" In the silence, the young girl sitting in the shadows raised her head. A trace of caution and seriousness appeared on her delicate face. "Especially the part about me, Dash." No. Yuan Zhao subconsciously shook his head. That guy was eating and drinking the entire way. His mouth didn't even rest. He didn't ask anything. Is that so? A trace of suspicion appeared in Yuan's eyes. After muttering to herself for a long time, she shook her head. Have you finished the things I told you to do? It was only now that Yuan Zhao saw the unread messages from Yuan on his phone. There were 6 messages in a row, but he didn't see a single one. When he opened the messages, his eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at his cousin in front of him. In the silence, only a crisp sound could be heard. Behind Yuan Zhao, the expressionless old servant quietly closed the door. What followed was a deathly silence that made people feel uneasy. At the same time, in the music hall's lounge, Weischer was counting his gains from the afternoon. 1 stainless elder, half an ounce of ghost spider silk, 2 ounces of green tapir's tail hair, and vermilion bird's tail feather. These things were all placed on the table, in front of him, after throwing away the box. It didn't even add up to £1. Other than the spider silk, they were all relatively common alchemy materials. In the end, because of the lack of time, Weischer was ruthlessly slaughtered several times. Even if it was just a memory, he could feel his heart twitching. Although his heart ached, his hands didn't stop moving. According to Crow's instructions, he first took a bath, then put on a pair of gloves. He used alchemy fire to evenly heat the stainless elder so that its internal structure would change in the alchemy fire and bend into a ring shape. The most important thing was that the internal structure had to be connected head to tail, forming a perfect closed loop. The advantage of the stainless elder was that its internal crystal lattice structure was very uniform. As long as the cross-section was cut, well, it was easy to handle. Next, the spider silk was woven into a thread. 4 strands of 2 ounces of spider silk were twisted together to create a thread that was about 10 meters long. Moreover, the spider silk thread itself was transparent and almost weightless in the hand. This part was a bit time-consuming, but it wasn't difficult. It could be done with a bit of concentration. Next, he used the spider silk to connect the materials together and wrap them around the ring-shaped elder. He also had to weave a complicated pattern inside. Finally, he had to decorate the bottom of the ring-shaped elder with a few pale tail feathers. Weischer held the thread at the top and lifted it up, carefully examining it. "This is a dream catcher." "That's right." Crow nodded. "To be precise, it's an entrance to a dream. Generally speaking, it's a tool used to infiltrate other people's dreams." "You want me to infiltrate other people's dreams?" "No, to be precise, I don't want you to infiltrate a person's dream." Crow deliberately emphasized the word person. "What you want to infiltrate is the dream of this Stellaris." Chapter 400. Weischer was dumbfounded. The astral? Trains can dream too? If it were a normal train, it wouldn't. But do you think that a normal train could travel on the endless sea as if it were walking on flat ground, and on such a large scale? Crow said, "Under certain circumstances, a person's dreams will be close to or even overlap with each other, just like soap bubbles flying in the air. If there is something in the area that emits a strong gravitational force, everyone will even enter a common dream. In the end, dreams are just illusions created by the activity of origin substances during sleep. As long as there are enough containers, you can store as many dreams as you want. To put it bluntly, you can plug into a server and turn it into an online game, right? I've discovered that you have a special ability to comprehend things in some strange places." "You flatter me," Weischer smiled reservedly. "But right now, the connection isn't that close. At most, we can sense each other." Crow sighed softly. After all, the astral has been asleep for so many years. After its consciousness has dissipated, even the dreams will become fleeting and thin. The old Orices has fallen to this extent. It's really sad. "What's that?" Weischer seemed to have heard something incredible. "Orices something something? Yes, it's Orices." Crow tilted her head and looked at him in confusion. "HM? Didn't I tell you before?" Weischer smiled and grabbed her by the neck. He took out the Book of Destiny. "How about this? Let's look back at the past records. If you did tell me, I'll give you all the money. If you didn't, I'll break your neck. How about that? Hey, young man, calm down." Crow flapped her wings and struggled. "Why are you treating a beautiful big sister like this? Don't be angry. I'll give you benefits. I'll give you benefits. Okay? I don't care. Thank you. Weisher stared at her with his eyes wide open. Can you please explain to me what's going on with Orris's? Well, it's a long story. Don't rush. I'll keep it short. Crow, who knew that he was in the wrong, looked around and said, I wasn't sure at first. After all, it has been sleeping for a long time, and it looks completely different from before. It wasn't until the Book of Destiny reacted that I was able to confirm it. So what exactly is Orris's? Weisher crossed his arms and looked at her, thinking with his heel. He knew that the person who was named after the Egyptian god of the underworld was definitely not a good person. If my guess is correct, the predecessor of the Stellaris should have been an official member of the Republic, a rank 5 ascendant of the Eternal Road in the celestial genealogy. The crow said gravely, Hell Destroyer Orris's. What? In the silence, Weisher felt her jaw drop uncontrollably to the ground. Didn't you hear clearly? It's the Hell Destroyer Orris's. The crow spread her little wings. It's a battle-level combat weapon codenamed the Nether God. Once it arrives on the battlefield, it represents the arrival of the Day of Judgment. With the support of the Republic, it's a combat robot that can put the ruler on trial. Wait a minute. Weisher forcibly dispelled the sudden emotion in his heart and raised his hand to stop her. If I remember correctly, isn't the first stage of the Eternal Road night? It's a night, that's right. The crow nodded. But you didn't specify what they rode, right? It's the 22nd century. Young man. There are cars and planes. Who would ride a horse? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Weisher burst into tears. He grabbed the crow's neck and shook it vigorously. I was just one step away. I was just one step away from becoming a pilot of a giant machine. Why? Why? Because you're poor, young man. The crow sighed. The Eternal Road is the most expensive celestial genealogy. Do you think you don't need money to buy equipment? All the combat power of a knight is above their mounts. They're both Tier 1, but they drive alchemy, heavy-duty motorcycles, and even exoskeleton armor. What do you drive? Do you think that's a permanent bike? When it advanced to Orris's, do you know how much money it burned through the Republic just to prepare armor for it? All the minerals at the 4 borders, and even the borders themselves were completely crushed. That 1 or 200 million can't even cover a floor. How can you be so stubborn? Weisher wanted to cry, but had no tears. He looked up at the sky and sighed. He was just a little bit away from becoming a pilot of a superstar robot. People just couldn't know what they had missed out on. Weisher even had the thought of cutting it down and starting all over again. Okay, the time for chit-chat is over. Orris's is already a thing of the past. The current Stellaris doesn't even have 1% of the power of the former Orris's. At best, it's just a wreckage. Otherwise, as long as it could be used, it wouldn't have been turned into a train that could only run once a year. But the fact that it was once a member of the Republic will not change. The reaction of the Book of Destiny proves this point. There's definitely a fragment of heaven inside it. All official members of the Utopia would receive a personal portrait imprint in heaven and carry that book with them as proof of their identity. In addition to giving them rare assistance and abilities, this book would also grow with them and eventually complete a breakthrough with them, reaching a higher degree of completion. Therefore, we must enter the last remaining consciousness of Orris's, find the location of the fragment of heaven, and determine to what extent this car has been eroded by external forces and whether there's still room to save it. Crow sighed. According to my original plan, if it's possible to recover, I'll just find a way to pack it up and take it away. Now it seems it's most likely dead. Chapter 401. What did you say? Amidst the awkward silence, Weisher looked at the huge steel cover in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. The light spot moved again, and soon a new line of words appeared. CCCCCCCC. In the silence, Weisher took a deep breath, took a step back, and then another step back. He clasped his hands together and said, "Sorry to disturb you. Goodbye." He turned around and left, but he was pulled back by an invisible force. "Shoo, shoo, shoo, shoo. I don't love you, get lost." Weisher struggled to pull his arm back, and then he saw a new line of words appear on the cover again. "I've seen Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens." Silence. Awkward silence. Weisher took a deep breath again, exhaled deeply, and then told him seriously, "Brother, if you do this again, I'm really going to leave." After a short silence, new words appeared again. This time, it was finally not some unintelligible words. "Damn you, you're my mast." Seeing Weisher's unfriendly expression, the words were swallowed up before he could finish writing. In the end, only 3 words were typed out. "Sob, sob, sob. What to do? I really don't want to talk to him." What the hell is this? The former celestial genealogy, level 5 ascendant Osiris, is a Martian, and he's also a freaking sob monster. Who can handle this? "Don't go, brother, I'm suffering. It's too hard for me." Seeing Weisher's expression change, a line of words appeared on the cover pitifully. "I've been imprisoned for 10,000 years. Please understand. Ever since Orton passed away, no one has spoken to me." "Orton?" Weisher asked. "Who's Orton?" "Orton was my former contractor, Osiris Pilot." Weisher couldn't believe the words on the cover. "I'm so miserable." That bastard's death was one thing, but he just had to give me the last bit of origin substance. I was perfectly fine as a book, but in the end, I forced myself to become a spirit. Then I was locked up here and had to take care of his funeral. It's so hard for me." "What?" Weisher's eyes widened. "Wait, if Orton is dead, then who are you? Are you a fragment of the kingdom of heaven?" Yes, that's right. But now, kingdom of heaven is only left with fragments, right? The moment I opened my eyes, the huge kingdom of heaven was gone. It was gone just like that. What kind of bad luck is this? What happened back then? How would I know? As soon as I was formed, kingdom of heaven stopped. He only knew that someone was messing with him, but he didn't know what had happened. It was simply more miserable than a screaming chicken. After waiting for so many years, I've already given up hope. I didn't think that someone would bring the Book of Destiny here. Brother, can you do me a favor and take me away? I'm easy to take care of. Just talk to me for 5 minutes every day. No, 3 minutes. No, even 1 minute is fine. The steel book began to shake violently, as if it was crying in a storm. In the blink of an eye, at least 3,000 words flew across the cover, causing Weisher's scalp to go numb. If he brought this thing home, how was he going to survive in the future? "Brother, please do me a favor. I'm easy to take care of, really." As if it was afraid that Weisher wouldn't agree, the cover suddenly shook. "I promise to eat less and work more. I don't need insurance or overtime pay. I'll also accept the leader's unspoken rules." Weisher began to doubt it from the bottom of his heart. "Bro, with your strange appearance, which leader would want to sleep with you?" Seeing that Weisher didn't believe it, the steel book began to shake violently. Immediately after, a square hole appeared on the cover. The corners of Weisher's eyes suddenly twitched violently. "You're really well prepared." He was already prepared to get the fragment of the kingdom of heaven, but he didn't expect to find such a self-aware and immoral fellow. He wouldn't abandon this book here, just because he disliked its chatterbox. Anyway, retrieving the fragment of the kingdom of heaven would also bring him benefits. Moreover, this place looked like a prison. If he left it here, it might really go crazy. Huaishir could empathize with it and understand its pain. Anyone who encountered this kind of situation where they were thrown into a prison and no one cared about them after they opened their eyes and gained self-awareness would not have a good time. If it were Huaishir himself, he might have already torn himself into a few pages and played games with everyone after splitting up. This wasn't the Night of the Witch, where he could activate the acceleration gear. 100,000 years of time was only 1 or 2 months, and the real time was only a short 8 hours. After surviving alone for so many years, it was only a brainless chatterbox that was a little non-mainstream. It could already be called an iron will. But the problem was, at this moment, Huaishir was only in the thin dreamscape of the Stellaris, entering the illusion outlined by the last remnants of Osiris's origin substance. Only his consciousness passed through the network cable and came to this chat room. He couldn't summon the Book of Destiny at all, let alone take anything away from here. After understanding the situation, Huaishir and the fragment could only look at each other. After a long silence, a line of incredulous handwriting appeared on the cover of the fragment. "Why are you so weak?" Huaishir was speechless. He clasped his hands together and said, "Indeed, I overestimated my strength. Brother Fragment, such a treasure of heaven, and earth like you must belong to the virtuous. I'll take my leave." "Wait, don't, brother. I didn't mean that. The Book of Destiny is in your hands. Who else can pass Orton's authorization verification?" The fragment asked in disbelief. "I thought there was a problem with my perception module. You don't even have a Tier 5? How did you get the Book of Destiny's approval?" Huaishir replied expressionlessly, "To be honest, one day I was walking in my backyard when this thing fell from the sky and almost hit me until I was hospitalized with a concussion." A series of ellipses followed by a series of exclamation marks, followed by a mess of emoticons. After the fragment vibrated twice, it seemed to be carefully examining Huaishir, sighing with emotion that there were all kinds of strange things in the world. Even this kind of strange person could pick up the Book of Destiny in his own backyard. If Huaishir reached Tier 5, he could directly use the Book of Destiny to be crowned and become the guardian of heaven. As long as his will reached, he could open a path to heaven at any time, allowing him to ascend directly on the spot. It didn't even consider the possibility that Huaishir was still a newbie. In order to obtain the approval of the Book of Destiny, one should at least be Tier 5. Otherwise, if his life wasn't tough enough, he would have been destroyed by the great creation that entrusted the fate of the entire utopia to him. To the outside world, it should be that a Book of Destiny fell from the sky and landed on Huaishir's body. However, Huaishir's life was as thin as paper, and he was actually smashed to death by this divine artifact. At this time, a Tier 1 Ascendant passing by saw this book and determined that it was not an ordinary item. After picking it up, he sighed with emotion. Then, he had a myocardial infarction and died. When the Tier 2 Ascendant saw this, he was shocked and died from a stroke. Next, let alone Stage 3 or Stage 4, without the permission of the Heavenly Kingdom's lineage master, even a natural enemy would accidentally slip and sink to the bottom of the abyss if they got hold of this thing. Not everyone was as lucky as that bastard, Zhuhai, to be able to climb back up after courting death by jumping off the cliff. However, what made it incredulous was that the Book of Destiny had actually appeared in Huaishir's hands. Moreover, it had actually acknowledged his identity without any authority and handed over control to it. This didn't make sense. The Book of Destiny wasn't an anonymous credit card that anyone could use as they pleased. This thing's anti-theft measures were so thorough that it was frightening. It could be said that if the president of the Astronomical Association had not personally entrusted this thing to someone else, then, wait, the president? All of a sudden, it seemed to have understood something. Even its handwriting became flattering. Brother, you misunderstood. I was just attracted by your shocking talent and admirable talent. I didn't expect you to be so young. As the saying goes, 30 years on the river surface, 30 years on the river bottom. Don't bully a young man for being poor, right? The future of a young man is really limitless. Maybe you'll be tier 2 this year, tier 5 next year. And the year after that, you'll be a natural enemy. Huaishir was shocked. He felt like he had seen this flattering look somewhere before. And he was in disbelief. Why are you suddenly so affectionate? To tell you the truth, from the moment I saw you, I knew that you were definitely going to be my brother. The fragment's cover flickered for a moment before it changed its words. No, brother, you're my biological brother. Don't you recognize your long-lost brother? Sorry, I'm an only child, and I don't have such a strange brother. Thank you. Huaishir suppressed his desire to turn around and leave. He took a deep breath and raised his hand, stopping the fragment from talking nonsense. Let's get down to business first. Huaishir asked, how do I get you out of this damned place first? After hesitating for a long time, the fragment could only tell him bluntly, it's very difficult. Recently, Osiris' final origin substance has begun to corrode. You don't have enough ability, so it's impossible for you to transfer it through dreams. You can only make physical contact and contain it. After it stopped talking nonsense, it became very efficient. A map quickly appeared on the cover. It was a detailed cross-section of the Stellaris. At the bottom of the map, there was a red dot. Huaishir leaned over and looked at it carefully. Where is this? The Stellaris vault. Goodbye, goodbye. Huaishir cupped his fists and turned around to leave without looking back. Brother, are you kidding me? How many valuable things are there on the Stellaris? How much money is in circulation? How many precious materials are there? How many ascenders are there? How many tier 4 people are there? Let alone tier 4. There are even tier 5. That's not how you play the game. I'm just a tier 2 newbie who hasn't even graduated yet. How am I supposed to fight them? Even if you want to die, that's not the way to do it. Chapter 402. Bro, don't go. Listen to me, listen to me. The fragment frantically sent out an invisible force, trying to grab him. It's not the vault, it's under the vault. The power room under the vault. I was locked in the cabinet by those stupid alchemists as a spare part for the auxiliary engine. That's not easy, okay? Huaishir glared. The power room is probably even more heavily guarded than the vault. You're trying to kill me. The Stellaris was not an ordinary train, but even if it was an ordinary train, there was no reason for tourists to run to the power unit of the locomotive to play, in order to guard against lunatics who brought a bomb and dragged everyone into the sky. Such an important place would definitely be guarded 24 hours a day. If Huaishir went there alone, it would be no different from breaking into the vault. That's only if those guards are normal. The fragment hurriedly explained. Since yesterday, those guys have let a wolf into the house. They've all become like zombies, their heads filled with nightmares. Otherwise, this place wouldn't have become like this. Bro, what's wrong with you? Don't go. Wait. Its handwriting was getting more and more hurried. This was because Huaishir's body was gradually becoming illusory. The illusion of the dream catcher appeared behind him. Then his consciousness was pulled back to his body by some kind of force, seeing countless words flash across the fragment's cover. Huaishir, who was in the air, could not help but sigh. I'll work hard, okay? You'd better not have too much hope. He paused and said, And what? The fragment was overjoyed. Bro, just tell me. Your name. Huaishir asked, You have to tell me your name, right? In a short silence, the fragment seemed to be stunned. Just as the scholar poem was about to dissipate, a hoarse whisper sounded in his ears, carrying a deep sense of melancholy and sorrow. Beelzebub, it said, just call me Beelzebub. Huaishi's figure suddenly shook and disappeared in the air. With his last glance, he finally saw the true cover of the steel book under the countless specks of light. Lord of the Flies. Huaishi opened his eyes and panted violently. He could feel sweat dripping down his back. Why am I so tired? Where do you think the dream catcher's power comes from? Could it be that there was an unplugged computer? We're using your origin substance. How can you not be tired? The crow rolled its eyes at him. It raised its wings and carefully lifted the dream catcher from the bedside. It roughly stuffed it into an iron box. Fastened the lid. The dream catcher net, which had originally looked extremely exquisite, was now covered in dust and was abnormally damaged. When Huaishi's authority card was shaken off, the hideous flesh hidden behind it was revealed. There's a little bitch who wants to steal the car. Who's the Fine Knight Society? Huaishi looked at her blankly. The gray-clothed man had mentioned this name before, but Huaishi did not have a deep impression of it. The crow was shocked and looked back at him in astonishment. How come you don't even know this? Don't tell me you haven't even read the present realm wanted list that the Astronomy Society gave you? Ahem, it's a long story. Huaishi looked away, awkwardly. Didn't the game Birth in Progress just come out recently? I've been a bit busy. However, now that the crow mentioned it, he seemed to have some impression of it. He had indeed seen this name in the list before. It should be in the category of the Abyss sect. However, there were too many names in this category, and the group of scammers was not very creative. They just used the same few words back and forth. At most, they would change the order. This was especially true for people like the rancher who liked to use alternate accounts and had many henchmen. He even liked to take over a magpie's nest and disguise himself as a doll. There were more than 1,800 sects that were suspected to be related to the rancher alone, and there were more than 600 medium-sized sects directly under the rancher. These sects were spread all over the world, including the borders of the present realm and even hell. Sometimes, even if these sects had the same name, they would point to different organizations and groups in hell at different times and places. If you want to ask, why sure to remember all of them? I think you're making things difficult for me. Lu Peppa of the Huai Sea. Sorry, I don't seem to remember anything other than the rancher. Forget it. The crow shook his head, helplessly. Speaking of which, the Fine Knight Society's backer is also related to the rancher. The object of their worship is the rancher's cheap asterisk and birth machine, that lucky player with no ability and no brain, Queen of Rotten Dreams. At the mention of this name, the crow's tone became mocking. Although that's the case, that bitch is still a ruler blessed by the abyss. Even if she is the most embarrassing one, she is still a ruler. Her ability cannot be underestimated. It seems that she has now suffered the consequences of her own actions. It was rare for the crow to reveal an undisguised disgust and contempt. This made Huaishi very curious. Do you have a grudge against her? No, to be honest, I've never even seen her before, nor do I have any dealings with her. I just purely hate those who make up the numbers. The crow paused for a moment and asked, if you were a self-reliant, confident, and beautiful big sister, would you admire an ugly, fat, and black bitch who only knows how to sell beeps? Okay, I understand. Huaishi nodded without hesitation. In fact, he did not understand at all, but it was the right time to agree. He could not show the slightest bit of doubt towards her words, especially the part she used to describe herself. But when he thought of the enemy being the Queen of Rotten Dreams, Huaishi felt a toothache. This was a ruler who had become the ruler of a large group hundreds of years ago, a terrifying existence who had received the authority of the abyss, the absolute ruler of the mirror world. As long as there was a mirror, her power could be extended to that place. Even her natural enemies would find it difficult to kill her or even catch her. With the protection of the authority of the abyss, she could go anywhere at any time, not to mention her terrifying ability to use dreams to subtly influence ascendants. It was because of this that Huaishur was puzzled. What does she want to do? No matter how precious the Stellaris was, how could it catch the eye of a ruler? No matter how weak the ruler was, it was still the ruler of hell. If it had been the predecessor of the Stellaris, Osiris, he might have treated it seriously, but the current Stellaris was nothing. The only part of Osiris here was probably Beelzebub. What was she after? What does she want to do? Haha, you should be asking her what she can do now. Crow sneered. Although I can guess a little, it's none of my business. Most importantly, she ruined our plans. Huaishur could not help but roll his eyes. The word, our, was used so well that it made it seem like he was not the victim. Anyway, that bitch who can't do anything right really pissed me off this time. Crow angrily walked around the table a few times with its little wings on its back. Suddenly, it turned back, its eyes shining. Idiot, I have another plan. Don't you have a plan? Huaishur was so scared that his face turned green. Every time you have a plan, I die a horrible death. Then, do you want to listen? Crow asked. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. I'll listen. Huaishur nodded crazily. How would he dare not listen? If he listened, he might have a chance to live. If he did not, he would be played to death. Crow showed a gratified expression, nodded, and said, First, pick up your phone. Huaishur picked up his phone. Okay, then, open the Astronomy Club's app. Next, click on the button for Emergency Report. Yes, that's it. End of the first 2 chapters. Chapter 4:03. Click the Emergency Report button below. Yes, that's it. Crow landed on his shoulder and guided him step by step. Take a picture of the Dream Watcher in the box. Focus, focus, focus. Okay, next, activate your LV6 copywriting skill and report to Jinling. The main point is that when you were sleeping, you dreamt of a pair of extremely lewd and despicable eyes. When you woke up, the Dream Watcher that you just bought became like this. Yes, write a bit more in this paragraph. Just write about how slutty that little b asterisk TCH is. Oh, that's a good description, right? He followed Crow's instructions and edited it. He also deleted a lot of personal attacks on the Queen of Rotten Dreams. A beautiful report was written. 3,000 words were precise and ingenious. The format was perfect. The words used were appropriate, and the writing was beautiful. It vividly expressed the integrity and infinite love of a member of the Astronomical Society, as well as the panic and helplessness of a 17-year-old boy. Huaishur read it several times. He wanted to stuff this into the Book of Destiny to make up the word count. It was written so well, as expected of me. After clicking the send button, he realized that he had sent another small report to the organization. Crow sighed and said, as the saying goes, dogs rely on their master's power. You unlucky kid. You haven't ridden the Astronomical Society's car yet. This time, we'll let you have a taste. Can't you find a better adjective? As long as you get the idea. Crow flapped her little wings happily. This time, let's do something big. When Huaishur heard that she was going to do something big, he began to have a headache. Don't get yourself into trouble again. Don't worry, I won't trick you. Crow was like a scumbag. She hugged Huaishur's shoulder and said that she would treat him well in the future. This made Huaishur feel more and more unreliable. Sooner or later, he would be played to death by this black-hearted woman. He raised his head and looked at the time. It was only 2 o'clock in the morning. Huaishur, who was physically and mentally exhausted, rolled his eyes. He lay back on the bed and fell asleep. 1 minute after the report was sent, the preliminary review report was sent to London Extension What? The staff on duty followed the regulations and sent 6 copies of the report to the Jinling branch, the Jingdu branch, the L4 headquarters, the Clock Tower Management Department, the Border Management Inspection Center, and the East Asia District No. 4 Management Countermeasure Center of the Central Command. 2 minutes later, the ear-piercing sound of a phone rang in the intelligence gathering room of the East Asia Division. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the bright lights, the phone was picked up by a palm. After 15 seconds, the summary of the information was completed. 2.5 minutes later, the preliminary sorting was completed and the results were out. 3 minutes later, the report from Shanghai Inspector Huaishur appeared in the database of the Clock Tower Management Department. It was listed as urgent. Hongqiao Beta Branch begins preheating preparation. 3 minutes later, the Management Strategy Center approved the application for the emergency upgrade of the Asian border security level. At the same time, the new operation permit was issued. The command authority was transferred to the former Dark Army Secret Operations Division. The new supervisor's authority application report was approved and passed. At 4.5 minutes, an ear-piercing alarm sounded from the inspection ship on the Endless Sea. 5 minutes later, the Iron Casting Legion was on standby. 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. When the 9th minute arrived, the huge institution hidden behind the curtain had finished preheating. Thousands of personnel on duty began to perform their duties and tasks in accordance with the regulations. Tens of thousands of people received an urgent notice from the higher-ups and entered a standby state. A total of 301 people's holidays were temporarily canceled, and more than 600 emergency recall notices were sent to different depths of hell. Because the Astronomy Association raised its eyes and looked at the abyss under its feet again. 10 minutes later, Huaishur turned over in his sleep and began to snore. If you have a dream, do it. Don't wake up. The next day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Huaishur's door was knocked on. The old man in charge of hosting the concert hall reminded softly outside the door, "Mr. Huaishur, you have a friend visiting. Would you like to wait in the lounge for a while?" "Friend." Huaishur was taken aback. "Is it a man or a woman?" "It's a woman." The old man's answer gave Huaishur an ominous premonition. Looking back at the emergency report he had just sent out last night, the ominous premonition suddenly became stronger. 3 minutes, I'll be done immediately. Huaishur jumped out of bed and began to quickly wash up. After putting on his clothes, he pushed the door open and rushed to the lounge. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw a slender silhouette in the spiraling fragrance of tea, but it was completely different from what he had expected. Yuan. The girl in the gray skirt heard this and raised her head slightly. Looking at Huaishur's confused look, she seemed to have noticed something. "Mr. Huaishur, did you misunderstand something? It seems that I came at the wrong time." Huaishur reacted quickly. She did not say anything that would spoil the mood, like, "Why is it you?" After coughing twice, she sat down and put on a businesslike smile that she had learned from old Lu. "What brings Miss Yuan here?" At the same time, he secretly raised his guard. For some reason, he always felt a strange feeling in his heart. The calm and indifferent girl in front of him was not as simple as she looked. The purpose of coming to the Stellaris was not as simple as she said. Especially after learning about the existence of the Fine Night Society, he was even more vigilant. The world was always so crazy. Who knew what kind of madness was hidden under those beautiful faces? More importantly, when the girl looked at him with a pair of scrutinizing eyes, Huaishur's sense of crisis faintly rose in his heart. It was as if There was something dangerous hidden in her eyes. Yuan put down the teacup and seemed to ponder. Soon, she said directly, I came here this time mainly to apologize to you for Wang Su's stupid words yesterday. I hope this will not affect your relationship with Zhao. No. Huaishir waved his hand with a look of indifference. Anyway, he was satisfied with showing off. After that, he would not remember the names of some people. If Yuan did not mention this matter, Huaishir would have almost forgotten the name of that guy. That's great. Yuan smiled slightly, and her tone was slightly relaxed. Zhao's character is relatively unsociable. It seems that he has no friends. This time, to be able to see him get along so well with others, to be honest, I was a little surprised. He didn't give you any trouble, did he? Ahem, no. Huaishir hurriedly waved his hand. We help each other and understand each other. Although Yuan Zhao is sometimes a little impulsive, he is still very good. Looking at the flawless smile of the girl in front of him, Huaishir felt that something was wrong. Why was the conversation between the two full of déjà vu, like parents meeting in front of the school gate? Speaking of which, aren't you only a year older than Yuan Zhao? You are only 16 now. A certain someone who had completely forgotten that he was also 17 couldn't help but complain in his heart. In that case, I will not disturb you. I will take my leave. As if she had come specially for this. After Yuan finished speaking, she politely got up and said goodbye, which made Huaishir a little stunned. That's it. It's not good to leave so soon. Huaishir got up to send her off, and habitually asked, Why don't you leave after breakfast? Yuan's footsteps paused, and she turned back to ask, Won't it be troublesome? Of course it will be troublesome. Huaishir could not help but want to slap his own mouth. Why are you being so courteous when you have nothing better to do? Just send her away quickly and be done with it. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Not at all. It's just a matter of a pair of chopsticks. Huaishir pretended to be generous and enthusiastic and waved his hand. It just so happens that I haven't eaten yet. Let's eat together. Then deference is no substitute for deference. Yuan readily accepted, smiled and nodded, and stood in the same place. The subtext seemed to be, Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and lead the way. So your Yuan family is so rich. Why do you have to take advantage of me for breakfast? Huaishir ignored the shameful incident of wanting to freeload lunch yesterday. He kept a smile and opened the door for her. Without waiting for Huaishir's order, the old man in charge of the concert hall had already prepared 2 breakfasts in the dining room and considerately prepared coffee and black tea. The breakfast was a Western-style combination of bread, toast, and fried eggs. The amount was not much, but it was very delicate. The fire control of the fried eggs was quite good. A little pepper and salt were sprinkled on the sun-fried eggs. After the fork poked the sun-fried eggs, the thick egg yolk flowed out, making people drool. It had to be said that it was quite pleasing to have a well-bred girl sitting across from him eating. After Huaishir took a few glances, he politely withdrew his gaze and bowed his head to eat his share. He paused for a moment. He seemed to have heard a short and fragmented sound, which made his back faintly cold. When he looked up, it seemed that there was nothing unusual. Yuan still had her head down, eating her share. She noticed his gaze and looked up in confusion. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? No, there isn't. Huaishir reluctantly smiled and lowered his head to continue eating breakfast. After finishing breakfast, Yuan put down the teacup and suddenly said softly, Excuse me for asking, Mr. Huaishir, do you have any plans today? No need to be so polite. Just call me Huaishir like Yuan Zhao. Huaishir shook his head. Although I'm waiting for a call from the astronomy committee, I'm quite free during the day. What's the matter? When he said the astronomy committee, he slightly emphasized the pronunciation and paid attention to Yuan Yuan's reaction. But of course, he did not see anything. Or rather, he was never the kind of person who was particularly good at reading other people's faces. If Yuan Yuan hadn't been so shocked that the teacup in her hand had fallen under the table, he wouldn't have been able to see anything at all. Yuan Yuan still smiled. That's great. To tell you the truth, I've been practicing the violin recently. Yuan Yuan put her hands in front of her knees and said in a dignified manner, I came to Stellaris this time because I wanted to buy a suitable zither and music score. But after looking at it for the whole afternoon yesterday, I really don't know what to choose. Can you give me some advice? Okay. After hesitating for a moment, Huaisher nodded. If you want to go out, I'll change my clothes. Please wait a moment. When Huaisher turned around, he heard the same fragmented sound again. It was like an illusion. He did not stop moving, as if he did not hear anything. He pushed the door open and went out. Chapter 404. When Huaisher changed his clothes and walked out of the bedroom, the old man in charge of the concert hall showed a puzzled look. Are you going to go out like this? Huaisher was puzzled and looked down at himself. There was a simple gray iron windbreaker with defensive power, a pair of sturdy and durable overalls that had been treated with alchemy, a pair of boots that would not have a problem running over mountains and valleys, and a god-tier satchel that contained the Sword of Virtue and other equipment that could be used in emergencies. He was armed to the teeth, enough to deal with any trouble. Flawless. Is there a problem? The old man's expression suddenly became complicated. He put down the towel in his hand. Please wait a moment. Within a few minutes, he came out of the warehouse with a set of brand new clothes in a storage bag. He also chose a pair of leather shoes, a shirt, a tie, and a pocket handkerchief for Huaisher. After putting them down, he looked at the young man in front of him and asked, Do you have the habit of using tie clips? There's no need, right? Huaisher hesitated whether to accept this kindness or not. He waved his hand and said, To be honest, I'm already very satisfied to be able to live here for free. I don't need anything else. But these are all within the scope of the membership service. The old man asked doubtfully and immediately understood. If you don't feel that these don't match your identity, I can contact the tailor shop later to provide you with an exclusive customization service. No. I just feel that one-sided demand is not a normal relationship. Huaisher waved his hand and said seriously, If I can pay, I'll feel much better. The old man was silent for a moment. I understand the problem. He suddenly laughed and asked seriously, You're now a rather successful ascender. You've made a name for yourself. But will you consider giving up the time and love to invest in music? Huaisher shook his head as a matter of course. Then, music will not give up on you. The old man put the clothes in his hand and said seriously, This hospitality comes from your heartfelt love for art, regardless of anything else. This is a small reward for your passion for art. You deserve it, and you deserve to enjoy such honor. As he spoke, the old man representing the Hell United Music Association placed his hand on his chest and bowed. He calmly said, Unless you abandon all of this one day, we will never leave you. After a long silence, Huaisher couldn't help but laugh. Is this a blessing or a curse of art? It's just an insignificant reception. The old man took a step back and left respectfully. Huaisher turned around and looked at the low-key and solemn formal attire on the table. After a long time, he couldn't help but shrug and change into a new set of clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror. In the mirror, the handsome young man in formal attire grinned at him, revealing a smile. It looked pleasing to the eye. Sorry to keep you waiting. Huaisher pushed open the door to the lounge and nodded to the girl inside. "Miss Yuan, can we set off now?" When Yuan looked up and saw the new Huai-Shi in front of her, she was stunned for a moment. She didn't react in front of the standard business smile of old Lu. After a long time, she noticed her absent-mindedness. "Just call me Yuan." She hid a flash of emotion and said politely. Just as he was going out, Huai-Shi heard a small sound behind him again. This time, it seemed to be closer. "Where's Yuan Zhao?" he asked casually. "He didn't come?" He seemed to be staying up late playing games last night, and then suddenly caught a cold. Now he's lying in the hotel and sleeping. Yuan shook her head regretfully. "He doesn't want to get up, no matter how I call him." "Is that so?" Huai-Shi nodded absent-mindedly. Her heart sank as she recalled the calls she had made to Yuan Zhao that hadn't been picked up. But at the same time, although he didn't know what Yuan was planning, he actually began to look forward to it. What would be waiting for him outside? Today's Stellaris seemed to be different from yesterday. It was still bustling with noise and excitement, but there were more trained policemen in black on the streets with cold expressions. They didn't hide their vigilance at all, and their cold eyes swept across the faces of the passengers. There were also more security and scanning equipment. Under the surveillance cameras everywhere, the originally happy and relaxed passengers couldn't help but feel depressed. What's wrong? Huai-Shi looked at those people in confusion. It should be about what happened last night. Beside him, Yuan said, "I heard that a lot of people had nightmares last night. It seemed to be some kind of curse. Even the management of the train wasn't spared." "Mr. Huai-Shi, did you rest well?" "I slept very well. I didn't have any dreams. When I opened my eyes, it was already morning." Huai-Shi replied, "Maybe it's because I bought the dream catcher during the day yesterday, so no nightmares disturbed me. Miss Yuan, what about you?" "I didn't sleep much." Yuan shook her head. "I can't sleep well outside. I only slept for a while, when it was almost morning. If it's convenient, let's buy 2 more dream catchers later. I hope it will work." "Okay, but I don't remember where the stall was yesterday. Let's try our luck." Huai-Shi considerately asked, "Do you need to find a place to rest for a while?" "No, let's go." Yuan quickened her pace and led the way. The place they were going to was not far. They only went up 1 floor, and it was on a rather bustling street. Outside the quaint shop, there was already a store manager waiting in front. "Welcome again, Miss Yuan." The manager nodded and smiled politely. "The violins you named yesterday have just been delivered to the shop. Would you like to see them now?" "Of course. Thank you." Yuan nodded and walked into the shop behind the door. The moment he stepped into the shop, Huai-Shi felt several eyes vaguely looking at him. When he looked around, the people dressed as shop assistants quickly withdrew their gazes. He didn't know if they had made preparations in advance or if they really wanted to buy violins. Soon, after black tea was served and they were asked to wait for a moment, 3 violin cases placed between aluminum alloy boxes and sponge were brought up. Just by looking at the 3 exquisite violin cases in the metal boxes, one could tell that the price was not cheap. Moreover, there was a faint fluctuation of origin substance. It was obvious that the painstaking effort and will of the violin maker was put into it. Even without opening it, Huai-Shi could feel that it was a rare masterpiece. After the violin cases were opened, the manager began to enthusiastically introduce the origin and history of the 3 violins. One of the oldest violins could be traced back to several decades ago. After such a long time, there was still no visible damage. Under the careful care, it was even more precious. After the manager finished the introduction, Huai-Shi asked curiously, "Generally speaking, shouldn't there be a violin maker stationed in your shop to provide advice to customers at any time? Why don't I see one?" The manager's smile stiffened. His eyes moved slightly, as if he wanted to look somewhere. Then he restrained himself and showed an apologetic expression. Because of health reasons, the violin maker can't come to the shop to provide service to customers these 2 days. Please forgive the inconvenience. It's fine. Anyway, even if he came, he might not be better than me. Weisher calmly waved his hand, but the manager's expression twitched. He didn't know if he admired Weischer's face or was curious where this idiot came from to have such inflated self-confidence. In fact, there was no need to choose. The 3 violins were all rare and good violins. Moreover, the difference in tone was not big. Although the price was also very beautiful, it was not a problem for the rich and overbearing Jen family. The only difference was the suitable playing style. This was also not important for beginners. People who started to learn absolutely had to go through the most rigid and rigorous training to lay a good foundation. After 3 or 4 years of hard practice, they could talk about playing style. Talking to a novice about this was as absurd as talking to a primary school student about how to choose a university major. Weischer casually pointed to the one that looked the best and suggested to Yuan, "You can try this one." The girl picked up the violin. After pausing for a moment, she skillfully played a section of the small concerto. This section of the performance was not bad. It was obvious that she had a good foundation. After a short performance, she looked back at Weischer and asked for his opinion. "Very good. Although I haven't played the violin much, I can hear that your sense of sound is very good. Your basic skills are very good." Weischer casually picked a few small problems and talked about it. Yuan bowed her head and played again. This time it seemed to be better. Her comprehension was very good, but the vibrato was always a little bit off. Weischer stood behind her and corrected some of the omissions in her performance. Unconsciously, the 2 people were very close to each other. He could almost feel her temperature. Just as Weischer was about to reach out and correct her finger technique, he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, can you show us your documents?" 2 patrolling guards walked into the shop and broke the original atmosphere. Weischer took a step back and saw that the shop assistants had already gathered here. They seemed to be watching, and in the reflection of the glass of the cabinet, Yuan's smile flashed with a hint of gloominess, but it quickly disappeared. "No problem." Weischer handed over his documents and let them check. When they saw the sign of the Astronomy Association on Weischer's inspector ID, the 2 patrolling guards were stunned for a moment. They respectfully took it with both hands, verified it, and returned it. Soon they left. Yuan picked up the violin again and was about to say something when she heard Weischer's voice. "Sorry, I'm going out for a smoke." He directly pushed the door open and went out. There was definitely a problem. In the alley next to the pedestrian street, Weischer leaned against the wall of the carriage. He lowered his head and lit the cigarette in the corner of his mouth, recalling everything that had just happened. If the guards didn't push the door open, what would have happened? He narrowed his eyes and pondered. A voice came from the side. "Can I borrow a lighter?" "Okay." Weischer subconsciously handed the lighter over, but the other side didn't take it. When Weischer looked up, he reacted and opened his eyes wide. "Why are you here?" You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.